The storm had passed by nightfall, leaving a strange silence over the red plains of Lyri 7, a remote planet where nothing ever seemed to happen until Elias Varn stumbled across something impossible. He had been walking back from the Kung's tower, his boots sinking slightly in the damp soil left behind by the acid rain, when a glint of metal caught his eye near the ridge. Curious, and with the sky beginning to clear overhead, he moved toward it, expecting a fallen drone or broken mining pod. But when he reached the crater, his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't debris. It was a pod, oval-shaped and partially buried in the earth, still hissing softly from impact. And next to it, barely visible, lay a figure, curled in on itself, like a wounded animal. Elias climbed down, slipping slightly on the loose soil, and crouched beside the being. It was unlike anything he had seen, not human, but not entirely monstrous either. Slender limbs, skin like polished gold, thin glowing lines pulsing faintly across its surface, alive but barely. The creature's chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, and blood, a shimmering pale blue, oozed from a gash along its side. Elias hesitated, glancing back toward the distant lights of the base. Protocol said to report and isolate any alien life immediately. But Protocol had never looked into this creature's eyes that suddenly fluttered open and locked onto his, wide, luminous, full of something more than fear, something almost human. Slowly, without thinking, Elias took off his jacket and wrapped it around the creature. It flinched, but didn't resist. He whispered softly, unsure why, as if speaking to a child or a wounded animal, "You're going to be okay." The words sounded foolish, but he kept speaking. The creature's eyes closed again, as if comforted by the sound. Elias lifted it lighter than expected and carried it back across the plain, moving quickly and nervously under the flickering moons above. He entered his private storage shed, rarely used and out of sight from the main crew quarters, laying the being gently on a pile of folded tarps. All the while his heart thudded, not from fear, but from the strange sense that something extraordinary had begun. He treated the wound with basic med supplies, the gel hissing softly against the alien skin, and then sat beside it, trying to make sense of what he'd just done. Hours passed. The being remained unconscious, though its breathing steadied. Elias didn't sleep. He kept checking the monitors, ensuring no one had followed him. He wondered what this creature was, where it came from, why it had crashed, and why it felt so wrong to leave it alone. The next morning, before the sun rose, the being stirred again. Elias leaned forward, watching in silence. Its eyes opened slowly, scanning the room, then fixing on him. For a moment, neither moved. Then the creature's lips parted, and in a soft, clear voice, it spoke one impossible word that made Elias's blood turn cold. Why? The voice was feminine, gentle, filled with confusion, but not fear. Elias's mouth opened, but no sound came out. How could it speak English? How could it speak at all? He shook his head slowly and said the only thing he could, "Because you needed help." The being blinked, then closed its eyes again, as if satisfied with the answer. Elias stared at it, questions piling in his mind, but one thing was clear: this was no ordinary creature. It had intelligence, awareness, and if it was here, someone or something must be looking for it. He looked toward the sky, then back at the sleeping figure. Whatever happened next, nothing on Lyra 7 would ever be the same again. The sun had not yet risen when Elias woke to the soft sound of movement inside the shed, his eyes snapping open to find the golden-skinned creature sitting upright, its back straight despite the wound that had not yet fully healed. It looked stronger, more alert, and somehow more regal than it had the night before, and when their eyes met, Elias saw something new, a quiet strength, a gaze that held secrets far older than anything he could guess. He sat up slowly, careful not to startle her, and spoke in a calm voice. "You're awake." The creature nodded, her expression unreadable, and after a long pause, she said in that same soft voice, "My name is Yurale." Her words were smooth, each syllable clear and precise, too perfect to be the product of translation software or guesswork, and Elias couldn't help but ask, "How do you know English?" She looked at him then, not with surprise, but with something close to amusement, as if his question had been expected, even predictable. "We've been listening to your broadcasts for decades," she said simply, as though it explained everything. "Your people speak often and loudly." Elias frowned, feeling a chill crawl down his spine, not from fear, but from the realization that Earth had never truly been alone, that someone had been watching humanity for a very long time. He studied her more carefully now. Her clothing, though torn and scorched, had clearly once been made of fine materials, flowing fabrics that shimmered slightly even in the dim light. Her posture, the way she moved, the calm way she spoke, all of it hinted at someone important, someone raised with dignity and power. "You're not just anyone," he said slowly. "You're someone high up." Jarle tilted her head. "I am, or was, next in line to rule the Alari ascendancy." Elias stared, stunned by the confession. He had never heard of the Alari before, but the weight behind her words told him it was no small name. She explained further, her voice low, almost bitter. "There was a coup. I escaped in disguise, hoping to reach allies on a nearby system. But my ship was struck by a stealth missile. I fell here. I didn't think I'd survive." Elias couldn't believe it, a real alien princess, wounded and hiding on a planet so remote it barely got cargo shipments. And somehow, by pure accident, or strange fate, he had saved her life. "If someone tried to kill you," he said carefully, "they might still be looking." Girale nodded. "They will come. They do not leave threats alive." For a moment the air grew heavy between them. Elias stood and began pacing. If what she said was true, it wasn't just a matter of hiding her from his crew, or keeping her alive. He was now involved in something far bigger, something that could bring war to the doorstep of humanity. Still, he didn't regret helping. Her, not for a second. "Why didn't you call your people?" he asked. "Surely they're looking for you." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't know who to trust. If the traitors monitor transmissions, I could lead them straight here. You may have noticed I was flying alone." Elias thought about that. She was smart, cautious, and yet she had trusted him, a stranger from a world she had only heard through signals and intercepted data. "Why?" She seemed to read his thoughts. "You were kind," she said. "When I was helpless, you didn't know who I was. You could have turned away, but you didn't." Elias looked down, unsure how to respond. He didn't see himself as a hero, just a man who couldn't ignore someone in pain. but hearing it from her made it feel different, important. He rubbed his neck, then said, "We have to keep you hidden, at least until we figure out who's looking for you and how close they are." Jarlath agreed, and together they made a plan. She would stay in the shed for now, hidden during the day, and Elias would bring her food and medical supplies. He would listen to the open frequencies for any unusual signals. And most importantly, he would tell no one. Days passed, and their quiet routine took shape. Elias repaired the cracked panel on the outer sensor array so he could boost their range, and every night he returned to the shed with updates, stories, and questions. Jarlath, in turn, shared pieces of her world, her people, her culture, a civilization built on precision, beauty, and a deep reverence for harmony. Despite the danger that loomed, they spoke often, and Elias began to feel something strange, something deeper than curiosity, something close to admiration, even friendship. One evening, as a windstorm roared across the plains outside, Jarlath sat near the heater, her golden eyes reflecting the soft glow, and asked, "Do all humans care for strangers the way you did for me?" Elias chuckled. "No, some would have walked away. Some might have sold you for a quick payday." She nodded, unsurprised. "Then I was lucky." He shook his head. "No, I think I was." The words hung in the air, heavier than either of them. Expected. Before anything more could be said, a sharp alarm beeped from Elias's wrist, an alert from the base's long-range scanner. He glanced down, frowning. An unidentified vessel had entered the upper atmosphere. No transponder code. No broadcast. Just a silent, drifting shape coming closer with each second. Elias looked up, his pulse quickening. "Someone's here," he whispered. Jarlath stood, every trace of exhaustion gone from her posture. "Then we don't have much time." Their eyes met, and in that moment Elias realized something else. He wasn't just protecting a lost alien anymore. He was protecting a key to something far larger than himself, and he would not let her fall. Not now. Not ever. The sky above Lyrae 7 turned darker than usual as the unidentified ship broke through the clouds in silence. A shadow drifting down with no lights, no message, and no sign of peace, and Elias Varn stood beside the window of the comms tower, his heart pounding, knowing without a doubt that this wasn't a supply run or a lost explorer. It was them. The ones Jarlath had warned him about, the ones who had tried to kill her before, and who had now come to finish what they started. He raced back to the shed without a word to the other crew members, who were still asleep or too distracted by their own routines to notice the danger coming from above. When he burst through the shed door, Jarlath was already awake and standing, her face calm but her eyes sharp, her golden skin catching the soft light like polished armor. "They've found me," she said before he could speak, and Elias nodded, breathing hard. "I saw the ship silent, no codes." "It's them." She didn't argue. Instead, she stepped forward, placing her hand gently on his arm. "We must not panic. Panic will get us caught." Elias pulled open a floor panel and handed her a small bag packed with basic supplies, tools, and a scanner, something they had prepared just in case this moment came. "There's an old ventilation tunnel that runs behind the ridge. If things get bad, use it and keep moving. Don't look back." But Jarlath didn't take the bag right away. She looked him in the eyes and said quietly, I won't leave unless I have to. I don't run from shadows anymore." Elias didn't have time to argue, because a soft buzzing sound filled the air, like insects swarming, only sharper, darker, and more mechanical. It was a scout drone, sweeping low across the plains. It passed over the main base, then turned toward the shed. Elias grabbed his pulse wrench and moved to the door, crouching just as the drone hovered outside. Its sleek black body scanned the shed with an eerie red light, then slowly turned away and flew off toward the crater. Geraldine didn't move, her breathing steady, though Elias could see the tension in her jaw. "They're searching," she whispered. One step at a time, he nodded and checked his wrist display. 4 more drones appeared on the radar, spreading out like spiders across the ground. Elias knew they had only minutes before someone came in person. "We have to throw them off," he said, grabbing a fuel cell from a storage bin and wiring it to a comms beacon. "I can send out a false signal. Make them think you're still near the crash site." Geraldine didn't hesitate. She helped him adjust the frequency, her fingers moving quickly over the controls, and within seconds the beacon was ready. Elias ran across the rocky ground, ducking low, and planted it behind a small hill near the original crater. As he rushed back, he saw a dark figure drop from the sky-sleek armor, no visible face, moving with silent purpose. It landed not far from the crater, turned toward the signal, and started scanning. Elias reached the shed and locked the door behind him. "They bought it," he said, but Geraldine didn't smile. "They'll know soon enough. We must prepare." They didn't have weapons, not real ones. Elias had tools, a few improvised traps, and his knowledge of the terrain. But he also had something else, a fierce determination not to let her be taken. He set up motion sensors along the path leading to the shed, linked them to his wristband, and dug small trenches filled with reactive gel behind the outer wall. Geraldine worked beside him, never complaining, never hesitating, and for a moment Elias forgot she was royalty. She was a fighter, standing shoulder to shoulder with him in the dirt, her eyes watching the skies with the focus of someone who had lost everything and would not lose again. Then the first alert came, a soft buzz. Movement, 2 figures approaching. Fast. Elias pulled her behind the shed, and they waited. The footsteps were light, almost impossible to hear, but the motion sensor triggered the first trap, a sharp pulse of noise and light that disoriented one of the attackers, who stumbled and fell. The second one adjusted quickly, heading straight for the door, but Elias jumped out and swung his wrench hard, knocking the figure sideways. The armor cracked slightly, revealing silvery skin underneath, clearly not human. The attacker hissed in an alien tongue and reached for a weapon, but Geraldine was faster, pressing a stolen stun rod into its back. It collapsed with a strange screech. Elias stared at her. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" She gave a faint smile. "Royal training isn't all ceremony." They dragged the bodies behind the shed and tied them with wire. Elias scanned the sky again. "That was just a scout team. The others will come," and they did. As the sun climbed higher, more attackers landed, their ship now clearly visible above the ridge, hovering like a predator waiting for its prey to tire. Elias and Geraldine moved constantly, avoiding drones, disabling sensors, using every trick they could. At one point, they lured a team into the old refinery pit, where Elias triggered a gas ignition, knocking them out cold. It wasn't about winning, it was about surviving, about staying one step ahead. The tension never eased, and the fear grew with every hour. Then came the worst sound, yet a sharp ping from the comms array, a message from orbit. Target confirmed. Eliminate with precision. No traces. Jirale read the message and looked at Elias. They've stopped hunting. Now they're executing. Elias's jaw clenched. Then we end this now. He had one final plan. Risky, desperate, but maybe enough. He wired the beacon to a high-voltage converter and set it to overload, then placed it beneath the ship's projected landing zone. If the ship descended to collect the attackers or finish the job, it would trigger a massive discharge. Jirale hesitated only once. If you do this, you may die. Elias looked at her, quiet for a moment. Better that than watching them take you. She stared at him with wide eyes, something shifting in her expression, something softer. You are unlike any human I've known. He gave a half-smile. We're full of surprises. Then the ship began to descend, its engines humming low. Elias waited until the shadow passed over the trap, then triggered the overload. A blast of light exploded into the sky, cracking the lower hull of the ship and sending its systems into chaos. The ship veered off, engines screaming, and crashed beyond the ridge in a ball of fire. Silence followed, broken only by the soft wind. Jirale looked at the smoke rising into the sky and then turned to Elias. You've done more than save a life. You've challenged a powerful enemy. You've made a choice most wouldn't. Elias wiped soot from his face and looked at her. What happens now? She stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. Now they'll come looking again. But next time I won't be hiding, and I won't be alone. As the smoke drifted higher and the stars above flickered faintly in the fading daylight, Elias knew the fight wasn't over, but he also knew he wasn't just a repairman anymore. He was part of something greater, and whatever came next, he wouldn't turn away. Not now, not ever. The smoke from the crashed enemy ship still curled through the sky when Elias stood beside the wreckage, his heart heavy with thoughts of what he had just done and what might happen next. Because even though the attackers were defeated for now, the truth was clear. They were only the first wave, and more would come soon. And maybe not just for Jirale, but for Earth itself, if her enemies believed this planet had taken sides in a royal war they didn't understand. Jirale stood nearby, silent, watching the flames fade, her golden skin smudged with soot, but her posture unshaken. And though she looked tired, there was a strength in her eyes that Elias hadn't seen before, like she had made peace with something deep inside her. They'll send a message back, she said quietly, if any of them survived. And if not, they'll send scouts when the ship goes dark. Elias nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. Then we make the first move. She turned to him, curious, and he explained his plan, not one built from weapons or power, but from something simpler, something Earth had kept buried for too long. The long-range signal dish on Lyra 7's ridge, old but still functional, originally meant to contact nearby colonies but never used for interstellar messages because Earth had no allies in the stars. But now Elias had something those colonies didn't, Jirale, a living link to a civilization far beyond their own, And if they could send out the right message, not a distress call, but a request for diplomacy, maybe someone would hear, someone who cared about peace more than conquest. As the day turned to night, they worked side by side, repairing the ancient dish, bypassing worn-out circuits, realigning the frequency modulators, and boosting the power through the base's backup generators. While they worked, Girale spoke. Of her people the Alari, once proud and wise, now fractured by ambition and fear, and how not all in her empire wanted war, how some still hoped for unity, and if they heard her voice again, they might act. Elias listened closely, fascinated not only by the words, but by the fire in her voice, the hope fighting through her grief. By midnight, the signal tower was ready, humming with energy, as the dish slowly turned toward the stars, and Elias stood before the control panel, hand trembling slightly, as he waited for Girale to speak. She stepped forward, calm and clear, and began to speak in her own language, fluid, melodic, strange, and beautiful all at once, while Elias recorded the message and encoded it into multiple formats, one of which included his own translation, a simple summary in Earth's tongue, explaining the situation, the danger, and the plea for peace. They transmitted the message on every frequency the old tower could reach, sending it toward every known Alari sector and beyond, hoping anyone was listening. Then they waited. For hours, for a day, for two. Nothing came back, and tension hung heavy in the air as they stayed close to the shed, watching the scanners, barely sleeping. Elias grew more worried with each silent hour, but Girale never lost hope, even as shadows gathered again over the plains. Then, on the third night, just as Elias was about to shut down the scanner for a brief rest, the console blinked a soft blue pulse, and a line of alien script scrolled across the screen, followed by a clear translation, signal received. Safe contact requested. Await coordinates. Elias stared, stunned, and called for Girale, who ran into the room, her eyes lighting up with cautious joy. She read the message once, then again, before whispering, "It's real. That's the Royal Beacon. They heard me. The Loyalists. They still live." Elias grinned, but their joy was short-lived, because the scanner picked up another signal, a smaller vessel entering orbit, but not a friendly one. Its signature matched the attackers from before, and worse, it wasn't alone 2 ships then. 3, then 5, all stealth class, no transponders, clearly not answering the call for peace. Girale's face turned cold. The traitors intercepted our message. They're coming to silence us. Elias clenched his jaw. Then we have to move before they land. If your allies are on the way, we need to meet them before the traitors. Do. She nodded, and together they packed quickly, loading the rover with food, data drives, and the last working scanner. Girale wore a cloak to hide her glow, and Elias gripped the steering bars as they sped toward the southern cliffs, where the signal suggested the Loyalists would land. The trip took hours through rough terrain, but they pushed through dust, storms, heat, and the eerie silence of a planet holding its breath. Finally, just before dawn, they reached a narrow valley with high stone walls and a clear view of the sky. They waited in silence, watching the stars, and then, just as the first light touched the rocks, a silver ship appeared, smooth and elegant, nothing like the jagged machines of the traitors. It hovered low and released a soft pulse of light. that shimmered across the valley, scanning for life. Giralay stood tall and stepped forward, lifting her hand, and the ship responded with a soft tone that echoed through the stone, a welcome signal. The hatch opened, and from the light stepped 3 figures in robes of deep blue, their faces calm, their movements graceful. The lead figure approached and knelt before Giralay, speaking in her language, and though Elias didn't understand the words, he knew what they meant: loyalty, respect, hope. But before they could speak further, the scanner beeped again fast. Frantic multiple ships approaching from the north, weapons hot. Elias turned to the newcomers. "We have no time. The traitors are here." The lead loyalist nodded and gave Giralay a small device. "This will shield your signal. But we must leave now." Elias looked at Giralay. "Go, this is your chance." She didn't move. "And leave you behind?" He smiled faintly. "They're coming for you, not me. I'll hold them off. Buy you time." But she shook her head. "You are the reason I'm still alive. You've already given me time. I will not run while you face this alone." The loyalists hesitated, then handed Elias a slim baton, some kind of energy weapon. He took it without a word, and together all 5 prepared for the final stand. As the enemy's ships roared down from the sky, weapons ready, Giralay stood beside Elias, her eyes steady. "This is first contact," she said quietly. "Not just between humans and Alari, but between courage and fear." And as the sky split with light and fire rained down from the stars once more, Elias gripped the weapon, ready to fight not for survival alone, but for a future he had never imagined. And for a second chance that now felt real, Elias stood beneath the massive crystal dome of the High Tribunal, feeling smaller than ever before, the weight of unfamiliar eyes pressing down on him as silent figures in flowing robes lined the curved platforms above, each one representing a different system loyal to the ancient Alari order. And at the center of it all stood Giralay, now dressed in full royal armor, her posture proud, her golden skin glowing faintly in the blue light that shimmered from the walls of the star chamber, though Elias could still see the flicker of tension in her eyes as she glanced his way. Only days had passed since the battle in the valley, where the traitors had tried once again to kill her, but this time they had failed, thanks to the arrival of the Loyalist fleet and the unexpected resistance led by a human mechanic from a forgotten Earth outpost him. And now here they were, summoned across space to the capital moon of the Alari system, where the tribunal would hear Giralay's case for truth, for justice, and for peace, and where Elias would be questioned as the key witness, a term he barely understood, but which clearly carried great weight in this alien court. As the glowing sigils in the air shifted and the chamber quieted, a tall Alari elder stepped forward, his voice calm and deep. "Princess Giralay of the House of Lathura, you stand before us not as a fugitive, but as a claimant to the ancient bloodline, and we have heard your cry, but the galaxy trembles with conflict, and we must judge not only your words, but your actions. Speak now, and speak true." Giralay stepped forward without hesitation. "I fled not in shame, but in warning. My brother Vorinth betrayed our family, corrupted the council, and sent assassins to silence me. I escaped with the help of this man." She turned slightly toward Elias, who knew nothing of our war, yet chose to save a stranger, to protect what he did not understand. He risked his life again and again, not for power or gain, but because he believed in what was right. And I believe such courage must be heard here today. A murmur passed through the chamber as all eyes shifted to Elias, who cleared his throat nervously and stepped up beside her, the robe they'd given him feeling too stiff around the shoulders. "I'm not a soldier," he began, voice rough. "I'm not a prince or a general. I fix machines. I patch wires. But when I found Girelais, she was wounded and alone, and helping her was the only thing that felt right. I didn't know who she was, but I knew what kind of person she was. She didn't lie. She didn't threaten. She asked for help, and when I gave it, she didn't use me. She protected me, too. I saw her fight, not just for herself, but for peace. I saw the people who tried to kill her, and I saw what kind of empire this will become if they win. That's why I'm here. That's why I'll speak if it helps her be heard." His words echoed in the silent dome, and for a moment no one spoke, until one of the elders leaned forward, their voice softer. "But you are human. From a world the Alari do not yet count as kin. Why should we trust your judgment in matters of royalty?" Elias paused, then answered, "Because when you're at the bottom, you learn to see clearly. I've seen lies. I've seen fear, and I've seen what hope looks like when it finally arrives." "Girelais is hope." Another elder spoke, sharper this time. "And what of the signal you sent? The one intercepted by the traitor fleet? You risked bringing war to many worlds." Girelais answered this time, her voice steady. "Yes, we took that risk, but war was already coming. Silence would not stop it, truth might." The tribunal fell into quiet discussion, their voices masked by a glowing barrier, and Girelais stepped back beside Elias. "They're listening," she whispered. "That's more than I expected." But their moment of hope was shattered when the chamber doors suddenly opened, and a new figure stepped inside, tall and cold-eyed, dressed in black armor lined with red, a man Elias recognized instantly from the vision screen Girelais had once shown him. "Vorinth," she breathed, and Elias's fists clenched. Vorinth walked with calm arrogance, his hands empty but his presence heavy. "I come not as a rebel," he said smoothly, "but as a prince. As heir, I challenge these claims, and I bring proof documents, records, and testimony from those who saw my sister's so-called allies fire first." A dark case floated behind him, opening with a soft hum to reveal glowing records. "She has brought a human to sway your hearts. I bring facts." The tribunal reviewed the files quickly, their expressions unreadable, and one of the elders turned to Girelais. "What do you say to this?" Girelais didn't flinch. "He shows you images of a battle he started. He hides behind screens while sending assassins. I have no documents, but I have a life saved by a stranger. I have those who fought beside me, not for reward, but for belief. If that is not proof, then we have already lost our way." Vorinth smiled coldly. "Then let us test this proof. I challenge the human. Let him stand in the trial of sight. Let him see the memories of my accusers, and let the tribunal judge." Gasps filled the chamber, and Elias turned to Girelais. "What's the trial of sight?" Her face had gone pale. "It's an old rite. You'll be shown both our memories. Yours will join them. And the tribunal will see what you saw, but if your mind breaks under the link, the truth will be lost." Elias hesitated, fear rising in his chest, But then he looked at her, and he remembered everything. The crater, the shed, the battles. Her voice in the dark, the loyalty in her eyes. "I'll do it." The elders prepared the chamber quickly, activating a swirling light around a central pedestal. Elias stepped inside, and Vorinth stood across from him. The lights spun faster, a soft hum rising as the chamber dimmed. Then it struck. A beam of light from the ceiling hit Elias's forehead, and suddenly he wasn't standing in the tribunal anymore. He was falling into memory. He saw the crater again, the broken ship, Chevrolet lying in the dust, bleeding. He felt her pain, her fear, her will to live. Then came the fight, the escape, the plea for help. He saw it all again, as if it were happening now. But then, darkness. Vorinth's memories surged in, twisted, cold, full of strategy and control. He saw the moment. Vorinth had ordered her death, how he smiled as the assassins boarded their ships. He saw the pride, the ambition. And then came the last memory. Vorinth, watching the signal from Elias's outpost, not with worry, but with satisfaction, knowing it would give him an excuse to move more forces. Elias gasped, falling backward, but the light caught him and brought him slowly back to the tribunal floor. The elders watched in silence. Then one of them stood. "The memories are clear. The human speaks truth. The prince does not." Vorinth's calm face twisted in a flash of fury, but before he could speak, the guards moved forward, surrounding him. Girlet stepped toward the center of the dome. "I do not ask for a throne. I ask for peace, for the lies to stop, for the light to return to the allery." The tribunal gave their answer without words, a soft belled tone, and the sigils above shifted into the seal of unity. Elias exhaled, heart pounding, as Girlet turned to him. "You've done more than speak. You've changed everything." And as the guards led Vorinth away, and the stars above the dome slowly brightened, Elias knew the trial was over, but their journey was just beginning. The sky above the Alari capital moon was clear, a deep violet filled with stars that shimmered like distant thoughts. But Elias wasn't looking up. He stood quietly on the palace balcony, staring down at the silver courtyards below, where glowing trees swayed in a wind he could not feel. His thoughts tangled between pride and uncertainty, because though the tribunal had declared Girlet rightful heir and exposed her brother's betrayal, the galaxy had not simply sighed in relief and returned to peace. Not yet, as whispers of rebellion still echoed in the outer colonies, and messages of warning flickered in the halls beyond the throne room, where loyalists scrambled to rebuild trust across the stars. Elias had done more than anyone ever expected, yet he felt more lost than ever, because now he was a symbol, a story told in whispers and headlines, the human who helped the princess. And though the attention wasn't hostile, it was heavy, and every time someone bowed or nodded respectfully, he wanted to step back and say, "I just fixed machines." Girlet, now robed in royal violet lined with silver, walked beside him often, but had little time for long talks. Her days filled with councils and meetings, her voice rising in calls for unity, her hands never still as she guided her people toward something brighter. But when she found a moment, even a breath between duties, she always found him, and in those moments her smile was not for the galaxy, it was for him. Tonight was different. The stars felt closer, the night air held a question, and Elias couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. When Jirale finally appeared, stepping out onto the balcony, her expression was unreadable, like she'd made a choice she wasn't sure how to share. "The tribunal has approved a new plan," she said softly. "An alliance, not just between Alari worlds, but with others. That includes Earth." Elias blinked. "Earth? But they don't even know about the Alari. Not really. They'll panic, which is why we want someone they trust to explain," she said. "Someone who's lived through all this. Someone who can show them that the stars don't only bring danger." His chest tightened. "You want me to go back?" She nodded. "Only for a while. You know your world. They will listen to you before they listen to me." He looked away, struggling. Part of him missed Earth, its mess, its smells, its loud, clumsy people, but another part had found something here, something rare and fragile. He looked back at her, seeing not the princess, not the leader, but the person who had once lain wounded in a crater, reaching for help. "And what about us?" he asked. "If I go back, what happens to this?" She stepped closer, her golden hand brushing his. "This doesn't end just because you leave. You saved me. You changed everything. But you're also a bridge, Elise, between them and us, between fear and something better." His voice was quiet. "I don't want to be just a bridge." Her eyes softened. "You're not. You're part of both worlds now. And you always will be." A message tone interrupted them, urgent and sharp. Jirale answered it quickly, and her face tightened. "There's unrest in the Hyler system. A fleet of rogue ships is on the move." Ilias's heart sank. Voranth's allies? Possibly. Or someone worse. She turned to him again. "We thought ending the trial would end the conflict. But it's only just begun." He took a breath. "Then I'm not leaving yet," she smiled, but it faded quickly. "Elias, this is more than a fight. This is about trust. If Earth doesn't understand what's coming, they'll make the wrong choice. We need them. I need them." "You mean you need me to convince them?" "Yes," she said softly, "because you're the only one who can." He stared at the stars, then at her. "Then I'll go, but I'll come back." She didn't answer with words, only reached forward, touched her forehead gently to his, and in that moment the stars felt very far away and very close at the same time. Within hours, Elias boarded the royal shuttle, now repurposed for peaceful missions, carrying records, proof, and his own voice. The journey to Earth was shorter than it had once been, thanks to Ellery drives and clearance from border stations that now answered to Jirale's flag. But when the blue planet came into view, his chest tightened. He hadn't expected to be afraid, but Earth was loud, suspicious, unpredictable, and as he landed in a secure zone near a space research station in the Andes, he realized that this mission might be harder than any battle. Officials greeted him warily, scientists buzzing around the alien tech, questions flying. Ilias told the truth, not just about the Alari, but about what had happened, what could happen, and what peace might look like if both sides were brave enough to try. At first there was resistance, doubt, even mockery. But then came the transmission, a direct message from Jirale, speaking not as a queen, but as a person, offering alliance, not rule, offering knowledge, not control. Her words were careful, honest, humble, and slowly the tide began to turn. Weeks passed, meetings stacked atop meetings, and Elias moved between roles: translator, negotiator, storyteller. Sometimes he longed for the silence of the crater, the quiet talks in the metal shed, but he knew why he was here. He knew who he was doing this for. And one day the message came. The Earth Assembly had voted. They would open diplomatic contact with the Alari. They would listen. They would try. That night Elias walked under Earth's stars again, looking up at a sky he once thought was empty, and whispered, "I'm coming back." When he returned to the capital moon, the palace was brighter, the halls fuller, but it was Jaira Lee, waiting for him by the gate, her cloak wrapped tight against the cool breeze. She smiled when she saw him, and when he stepped close, she whispered, "I knew you would." He took her hand. "They said yes, they want to talk. Then we've taken the first step." "And the next?" he asked. She looked into his eyes. "We walk it together." And as they stood beneath a sky shared by both their worlds, hand in hand, surrounded by stars and silence, they knew this was more than the end of a journey. It was the beginning of everything that came after. Peace, perhaps. Struggle, surely. But also hope, and something more, a heart held between two worlds, beating not for a throne or a flag, but for the choice one human made when he reached out to help a wounded stranger in the dust.